Every single night, he is defeated. He is speared, dismembered, and utterly destroyed by the gods. His head is severed by Ra, his blood staining the dawn sky a proof of his annihilation. And yet, every single night he returns. He is there in the darkness, waiting. Whole, immortal, and seething with a malice that cannot be killed. His name is Apep, the Serpent of Chaos. How can a monster be cursed to fail forever, yet be the one thing the universe can never, ever get rid of? The way those shadows lengthen and merge, turning the known into the threatening. This is a universal human experience. For most of us, living in this brightly lit modern world, it's a fleeting childish anxiety. It's a ghost story, a thrill, a moment of unease, easily banished by the clinical, absolute authority of the flick of a light switch. We are comforted by our certainty. We know, with the same infallible confidence that we know the law of gravity, that the sun will rise tomorrow. It is a fact of astrophysics. It is a matter of celestial mechanics, a dance of planetary rotation so predictable that we can time it to the second, years, decades, even centuries in advance. Our entire global civilization, our economies, our transport, our agriculture, our 9-to-5 lives is built upon this single, unshakable assumption: the light will return. But what if you didn't know that? What if you couldn't? What if you belonged to a civilization that for 3,000 years looked at the sunset not as a promise, but as a problem? What if you believed with every fiber of your being that the sunrise was not a guarantee? Imagine for a moment living in that world. Imagine believing that as soon as that golden disk of the sun, your God, your source of all life and warmth, vanished into the west, it began a desperate 12-hour battle for its very existence, a battle fought in a dark, terrifying, unseeable realm, a battle against an enemy that could not be killed, an enemy whose name was spoken in hushed tones or not at all, an enemy that existed for one purpose and one purpose only: to catch the sun, to swallow the light, and to plunge the entire created universe back into the eternal, cold, and silent blackness from which it came. For the ancient Egyptians, this was not a metaphor. This was not a children's story. This was a nightly reality. It was the central, terrifying, and defining fact of their cosmos. Every single night, as the god Ra began his journey through the perilous underworld, he was not merely opposed, he was hunted. And he was hunted by a creature of pure, unadulterated, unthinking chaos. A serpent so vast, it was said his coils were the size of the Nile itself, a monster of impossible scale, whose roar could shake the foundations of the world, a being of absolute malice, born not from the divine, but from the primordial sludge before creation. He is the Lord of Chaos. He is the serpent of the void. He is the enemy of Ra. He is Apep. Or as the Greeks, in their later attempts to understand this ancient terror, would call him Apophis. This isn't just the story of a mythological monster, another dragon for a hero to slay. This is the story of an idea, the terrifying, persistent, and, as we will see, perhaps necessary idea of indestructible evil. It's a story of a nightly battle that, for the Egyptians, defined the very nature of existence. It is the story of why the world is the way it is, why there is order, but also suffering, why there is life, but also death, why there is creation, but also the constant gnawing threat of its dissolution. And at the heart of it all is a profound and deeply human tragedy. The tragedy of a monster cursed to fight, cursed to fail, and cursed to return forever. This is the story of the god who wasn't a god. This is the story of Apep, the serpent at the end of the world. To truly understand the scale of this monster, to grasp why Apep was so much more terrifying than a mere giant snake, you first have to understand the single concept that governed all of ancient Egyptian life. It is the single most important word in their entire language, Ma'at. You'll see Ma'at depicted everywhere in Egyptian art, in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, on the walls of the temples at Karnak and Luxor. She is a goddess, certainly, typically shown as a woman, sitting or standing holding a scepter and wearing a single tall white ostrich feather in her headband. But she is more than that. She is a principle. She is that feather. Ma'at is order, truth, justice, balance, harmony, and righteousness, all rolled into one complex, beautiful idea. It is the cosmic order that was established at the Zep-Tepi, the first time, the moment of creation. It is the perfect, divine, and correct state of the universe. Ma'at is not a passive state of being. It is an active one. Ma'at is the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. It's the unwearying stars, the ones we call the circumpolar stars, rotating perfectly around the North Pole, never setting. It's the Nile flooding at precisely the right time, the Akhet, or inundation, that deposited the rich black silt that made life in the desert possible. It's the seasons, the inundation, the growing, the harvest, following each other in their proper, predictable sequence. But Ma'at wasn't just cosmic. It was terrestrial. It was human. In the political sphere, Ma'at was the pharaoh, ruling justly as a good shepherd to his people. The pharaoh's primary sacred duty was to be the champion and upholder of Ma'at on earth. When a new pharaoh took the throne, his royal titulary would often include the phrase establishing Michat, as if to say he was restoring the perfect order that might have wavered. The very act of unifying Upper and Lower Egypt, the two halves of the kingdom, was seen as a physical representation of Ma'at, a perfect, balanced, symmetrical whole. In the social sphere, Ma'at was justice. It was honesty in the marketplace. It was the vizier in his Hall of Two Truths, dispensing judgment without bias. It was the strong not oppressing the weak. It was a person living a good, honest, and community-focused life. When an Egyptian died, their soul was brought before the god Osiris for the final judgment. Their heart, the seat of their conscience and identity, was placed on a great golden scale. And what was it weighed against? That single white feather of the goddess Ma'at. If the heart was heavy with sin, with lies, with actions that had disturbed the cosmic balance, it would tip the scales. The heart would be declared heavy of Ma'at, and would be devoured by the monster Ammit, the devourer of the dead, condemning that soul to eternal non-existence. The entire purpose of Egyptian society, therefore, from the pharaoh on his golden throne, to the priest chanting in the temple, to the scribe with his reed pen, to the farmer knee-deep in the black mud of the Nile, was to uphold Ma'at. It was a universal, all-encompassing project, to live in a way that supported this divine, beautiful, and, as they knew all too well, incredibly fragile balance. Because balance, by its very nature, implies an opposite. You cannot have order without the threat of disorder. You cannot have justice without the existence of injustice. You cannot have creation without the potential for destruction. You cannot have light without shadow. The Egyptian word for this shadow, this antithesis, this unmaking force, was Isfet. If Ma'at is order, Isfet is chaos. If Ma'at is truth, Isfet is the lie. Isfet is injustice, violence, hatred, laziness, and decay. It is everything that is wrong. Just as Ma'at had its physical manifestation, so too did Isfet. Isfet is the Nile flooding too high, a raging, destructive torrent that washes away villages and drowns the crops. Isfet is the Nile not flooding at all, bringing drought, famine, and starvation. Isfet is the sickness in the home, the scorpion in the sandal, the crocodile snatching the washerwoman at the river's edge. And crucially, Isfet was geographical. The Egyptians called their own nation Kemet, the Black Land, after that life-giving, orderly black silt. It was the realm of Maat, but surrounding Kemet on all sides was Deshret, the Red Land. This was the vast, sterile, lifeless, and hostile desert. It was the home of bandits, of wild animals, of thirst. It was the physical, tangible embodiment of Isfet, a chaotic sea of red sand constantly threatening to encroach upon the thin black ribbon of life. In their history, Isfet was the foreigner at the gate, the invasion of the sand dwellers. The Hyksos, who ruled northern Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, were seen as a manifestation of Isfet. The mysterious sea peoples, who shattered the Bronze Age empires, were Isfet given form. But Isfet could also come from within. The intermediate periods, times in Egyptian history, when the central government collapsed, when civil war raged, when the kingdom split apart, were seen as the ultimate triumph of Isfet. Scribes from this time, like the author of the Lamentations of Ipuwer, wrote in despair of a world turned upside down, "The river is blood." The noblemen are in distress, while the poor man is full of joy. Every town says, "Let us expel the powerful from our midst." Lo, the desert is throughout the land. The nomes are laid waste. A foreign tribe from abroad has come to Egypt. This was Isfet made real. This was the failure of Maat. And Isfet, just like Maat, had its ultimate physical embodiment. While Maat was a serene, beautiful goddess with a feather, Isfet was a beast. It was a creature born not from the gods, but despite them. It was the ultimate other. This is Apep. According to the most potent myths, Apep was born from the primordial waters of Nu. Before creation, there was only Nu, an endless, dark, silent, watery abyss. It was not nothing. It was a formless, chaotic everything. It was potential, without form or consciousness. From this abyss, the first mound of dry land, the Benben, rose up. And on this mound, the creator god, Re-Atum, willed himself into existence. This was the Zeptepi, the first time, the first act of Maat, imposing will and form onto the formless chaos. Ra-Atum began to speak the world into existence, naming the other gods, the land, the sky. But this first act of creation, this first disturbance of the silent waters, had an unintended consequence. Some myths say that as Ra was born, his umbilical cord fell back into the waters of Nu. And from that discarded, bloody, unwanted piece of the Creator, Isfet took form. Apep was born. This is a chilling, profound idea, that the very act of creation also created its own negation, that Ra, simply by existing, cast a shadow, and that shadow was Apep. He is in this telling Ra's dark twin, his unwanted brother, forever bound to him, forever seeking to pull him back into the watery womb from which they both came. Other traditions say Apep was simply always there, lurking in the deepest, darkest regions of the Nu, and that Ra-Atum's act of creation was an invasion. It was a crime of imposing order on the beautiful, silent chaos. In this light, Apep is not the attacker. He is the original state of the universe fighting back, trying to reclaim his silent, dark domain from the noisy, bright, and orderly intrusion of the gods. His name, Apep, is chilling in its simplicity. It's thought to mean the giant, or perhaps the roarer. But the most common and most terrifying translation is the swallower. He was not a god to be worshipped. This is perhaps the most important thing to understand about him. The Egyptians had a complex pantheon. They had gods of dangerous things. Set, as we will see, was the god of the violent desert storm, of foreigners, of chaos itself. Anubis was the god of the dead and mummification. But these gods had temples. They had priests. They received offerings. They were part of the divine order, the Ma'at system. They were manageable forces, necessary parts of the whole. Apep was not. Apep had no temples, no priests, no festivals. He was the only major Egyptian deity to be universally and completely reviled. To even speak his name was to risk invoking him. Scribes would often write his name and then draw a spear through the hieroglyphs, or even mutilate them, to magically kill the name on the papyrus. He was anti-divine. He was anti-Ma'at. He was a being of pure Isfet who could not be bargained with, could not be placated, and could not be reasoned with. He could only be fought. His position in the cosmology was simple and absolute. He was the cosmic mistake, the destructive force that relentlessly, single-mindedly sought one and only one thing: to end creation, to swallow the sun, to kill the gods, to unravel the tapestry of Ma'at, and to return the entire universe to the silent, dark, and formless waters of Nu. And his primary target, the object of his undying eternal hatred, the source of all life, all order, all Ma'at, the sun god, Ra. We have to adjust our image of the sun god. It's an easy mistake to make. We see the stunning golden reliefs in the Valley of the Kings, the powerful hawk-headed figure, the sun disk blazing above him like a crown. We think of Ra as all-powerful, all-seeing, the king of the gods, crossing the bright blue Egyptian sky in his glorious golden boat, the Manjet, or boat of millions of years. And during the day, he was exactly that. He was a king in his prime, a triumphant, untouchable force, beaming life, warmth, and Ma'at down upon the land of Kemet. But when the sun set in the west, when it touched the Akhet, the horizon, that all changed. The western horizon was a liminal space, a doorway. It was the mouth of the grave. As Ra passed through it, he changed. He aged with the day. The hawk-headed, vigorous god of the noon sun became Adam, the All-Father, depicted as an old, weary, ram-headed man. He was still a god, still divine, but he was at his most vulnerable. His golden day boat, the Manjet, transformed as well. It became the Mesektet, the night boat. And his journey was no longer one of triumph. It was one of survival. He entered the Duat. The Duat was not a simple hell, not in the way we might think of it. It was not just a place of punishment, though punishment certainly existed there. It was the other world. It was the Egyptian underworld, a complex, terrifying, and profoundly magical landscape that existed parallel to the world of the living. It was the below. The Egyptians, with their love of order, mapped this realm with incredible precision. In their funerary texts, books like the Amduat, the book of that which is in the underworld, or the book of Gates, they detailed it completely. The Duat was a vast, long, subterranean river valley, much like their own Nile, but a river of darkness. And it was divided into 12 distinct sections, one for each hour of the night. This was not a pleasant journey. This was a gauntlet. Each of the 12 hours, or caverns, was a distinct realm with its own unique and terrifying inhabitants, its own challenges. The entrances to each hour were guarded by massive magical gates, and each gate was guarded by its own demon. These were not metaphorical. They were beings with names like He Who Lives on Serpents, or She Whose Knife is Sharp. They were depicted as grotesque figures, often with human bodies and the heads of serpents, crocodiles, or lions, brandishing enormous supernatural knives. To pass, Ra did not fight them. He had to know them. The goddess Isis, standing on the prow, would have to speak their true name and recite the correct powerful incantation. Only then would the gates open and allow the Mesektet boat to pass into the next hour. Imagine the first hour. The sun god, now old and frail, drifts into the water of Ra. It's a descent, a gradual loss of light. The Amduat describes the gods on his boat becoming silent, their voices growing faint. Imagine the fourth and fifth hours. This was the kingdom of Sokar, a primeval god of death, older even than Osiris. This was the deepest, most terrifying part of the Duat. The river turned to sand. The Mesektet boat had to transform into a serpent, slithering its way through the winding road, a dark, narrow passage in total blackness. This was a realm of fiery, burning lakes, of punishments for the damned, where souls were boiled in cauldrons, beheaded, or forced to walk upside down. It was the absolute nadir of the journey. And it was here, in this deepest, most chaotic part of the underworld, that Apep waited. Ra had to pass through the Duat every night. This was not optional. It wasn't just to light the way for the dead, though he did that, his fading light giving them a few precious moments of life. His journey was for a more profound cosmic purpose. He had to be reborn. In the deepest hour of the night, in the cavern of Osiris, Ra, the soul of the sun, would merge his essence with Osiris, the god of the dead. It was a mystical, powerful union. The living god and the dead god, the soul and the body, would become one. From this union, Ra would be rejuvenated. He would absorb the power of resurrection from Osiris, and he would emerge from this embrace, ready to rise in the morning as the youthful god Khepri, the scarab beetle, rolling the new sun, the promise of a new day, into the eastern sky. But Apep knew this, and his entire existence, his every fiber, was dedicated to stopping it. If Apep could stop Ra, if he could just delay him long enough to miss the appointment with Osiris, if he could wound him, or his ultimate final goal, if he could swallow the sun boat whole, it would all be over. The sun would not rise. Mat would collapse. Isfet would triumph. The universe would end. So every single night, as the Mesektet boat carrying the old god and his divine crew sailed into the darkest waters, the battle was joined. Apep, as we've learned, didn't just travel. He was a fundamental part of the Duat's geography. He was said to reside in a specific dark cavern, a deep, cold, sunless part of the underworld river. But his influence was everywhere. Imagine the scene, painted on 1,000 tomb walls, described in 100 papyri. The river, Ur-Nes, grows preternaturally still. The magical light that emanates from Re himself, which illuminates the cavern, begins to dim, to flicker, as if being smothered by an oppressive physical darkness. The gods on the boat, and it was an all-star cast, would fall silent. Who was this divine crew? This was Ra's A-team, the guardians of the boat. On board was Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, magic, and the moon. He was the divine scribe, the one who knew all the spells, all the true names. His role was not physical, it was intellectual. He was the navigator, the magic wielder, the one whose commands could bind reality. Beside him stood Isis, the great enchantress, wife of Osiris, mother of Horus. Her magic, or Heka, was perhaps the most powerful of all. She was the one who had tricked Re himself into revealing his secret name, giving her power over him. She was the protector, the one whose spells of binding and concealment would create a magical, invisible shield around the Mesektet. But magic was not enough. Isfet had to be met with force, and so standing at the prow holding the great spear was the most complex, contradictory, and fascinating figure in the entire Egyptian pantheon, Set. Now wait. To most of us, Set is the villain. He is the one who, in the most famous of all Egyptian myths, murdered his own gentle civilized brother, Osiris, hacked his body into 14 pieces, and scattered them across the Nile. He is the usurper, the one who plunged Egypt into a brutal 80-year civil war against his nephew, Horus. He is the god of the Deshret, the red land, the sterile, violent, chaotic desert. He is the god of rage, of confusion, of the brutal, unpredictable foreign storm. He is in almost every way a god of Isfet. And yet, here he is, on Ra's boat, as his chief bodyguard. This is the beautiful, stunning sophistication of Egyptian theology. They understood that not all chaos is the same. Set represents tamed chaos. He is the violence of the state, the necessary brutality of the soldier who defends the border. He is the thunderstorm that, while violent, must happen to keep the universe in balance. He is the loyal opposition. He is the one force of chaos that chooses to side with Ma'at. And in the darkness of the Duat, Set's true and vital role is revealed. He is the only god strong enough, the only god brutal enough, and perhaps the only god who understands chaos well enough to face Isfet head on. He is the chaos inside the system, fighting the chaos outside the system. The waters would begin to churn, not a ripple, but a roiling, massive disturbance, as if a mountain were rising from the riverbed. Then, the sound. The Amduat describes this in terrifying detail. It wasn't just a roar. It was a low, hypnotic, magical roar. It wasn't a sound, but a pressure, a vibration that could lull the gods themselves into a stupor, a state of magical paralysis. This was one of Apep's primary weapons. His voice, his very presence, was a wave of pure Isfet that sought to disarm his foes, to make them drop their spears, to make them forget their spells, to lull them into a sleep from which they would never wake. His gaze was another weapon, the evil eye of Apep. To be transfixed by his glowing red eyes was to be frozen, your will dissolved, and then he would rise. Scribes in the Book of the Dead and the Amduat struggled to describe him. A serpent, yes, but of an impossible scale. They gave measurements, 16 cubits long, which is over 7 meters, but in other texts he is 450 cubits long, over 200 meters, nearly 700 feet. His body, they said, coiled and uncoiled like the Nile in flood. His scales were the color of the void, a light-absorbing matte black, or sometimes a sickly green or yellow, the color of decay. His eyes, they insisted, glowed with a malevolent, terrifying red. Apep wouldn't just attack the boat. That was too simple. His tactics were more elemental. His first move was to try to swallow the river. Imagine it. He would open his colossal unhinged maw and inhale the waters of the Duat. He would literally try to drink the river dry, attempting to beach the Mesektet boat on the sands of the underworld, leaving it stranded, helpless, and easy to attack. These areas were known and feared as the sandbanks of Apep. This is when the divine crew would leap into action. As Apep's gaze and roar washed over the boat, Thoth and Isis would begin their chanting. These weren't hopeful prayers. These were magical commands. They were battle spells, spells for repelling the serpent. They would shout his true name. This was a core tenet of Egyptian magic. To know a being's Ren, its true name, was to have power over it. They would shout, "Apep, you who are spat out." They would cast spells of binding. They would weave magical nets of light to hold his coils. They would cast spells of confusion to blind his evil eye, to make him see illusions. The pyramid texts and later funerary books are filled with these protective incantations, literally hundreds of them, each one a different weapon in the magical arsenal. But magic alone wasn't enough. Isfet had to be met with force, and so Set, standing at the prow, his muscles tensed, would brace himself. He would resist the hypnotic roar. He would stare down the evil eye, and in his hands a spear, not just any spear. In some texts, it's a spear of bia. This is a fascinating word. It can mean iron, which was a rare, strong, and almost magical metal to the Bronze Age Egyptians. But it can also mean meteorite or celestial iron, metal from the sky. The only thing pure and hard enough, the only thing that came from the heavens that was worthy of piercing the hide of primordial chaos. As Apep lunged, his jaws wide enough to swallow the boat, the gods and the sun itself, Set would strike. With a roar of his own, a roar of the desert storm, he would hurl his spear. He would plunge it deep into the monster's skull or broad back. The Book of the Dead describes this moment. Other gods, sometimes even the souls of the righteous dead, the blessed dead, who, as a reward for a good life, were allowed to join Ra's crew, would join in. They would leap onto the serpent's back with ropes and knives, slashing and cutting, trying to dissect the monster. In tomb paintings, we see this moment captured forever. The most famous and powerful of these vignettes is known as the Great Cat of Heliopolis. It comes from chapter 17 of the Book of the Dead. The image shows a sleek, muscular, spotted cat. This is a manifestation of Ra himself in one of his most ancient forms. The cat sits beneath the sacred Persea tree, the tree of life which grew in the city of Heliopolis, the city of the sun. And with one powerful clawed paw, the great cat holds the writhing serpent's head down. With the other paw, he wields a long, sharp flint knife, and he is slicing deep and deliberately into the monster's neck. Every night the battle was desperate. Every night the chaos was absolute. And every night the gods were victorious. Apep, speared by Set, cut by Ra, bound by Isis, and cursed by Thoth, would be utterly, completely defeated. He would be hacked to pieces. His body would be bound in supernatural chains. He would be burned by the fiery breath of the sun god. His blood, gushing from his wounds, would stain the underworld river, turning it red. And this, the Egyptians believed, was the mythological explanation for the beautiful crimson hues of the sunrise. The red in the sky, just before the dawn, was not just light. It was the blood of the defeated serpent, the final beautiful proof of Ra's victory. His body would be left in pieces, his power neutralized. The Mesektet boat, battered but victorious, would sail on. Ra, having passed the ultimate test, would move towards the eastern horizon. He would complete his union with Osiris. He would be reborn as Khepri, the youthful, vibrant scarab beetle, pushing the new sun disk up over the Akhet. The doors of the sky would open, the sun would rise. The world was safe for another 24 hours. And here we arrive at the central, terrifying, and truly tragic theme of the Apep myth. It is the part of the story that elevates it from a simple monster tale into a profound and deeply unsettling piece of philosophy. He was destroyed. Think about that. He wasn't just defeated. He wasn't just repelled. He was, according to the text, utterly destroyed. The great cat of Heliopolis, the manifestation of Ra, sliced his head from his body. Set, the god of brutal force, plunged a celestial spear through his skull. The other gods, the blessed dead, leapt upon his coils with supernatural knives and hacked him to pieces. He was bound, he was cursed, he was burned, he was dismembered. His blood was spilt, staining the dawn sky. He was left as a mutilated, lifeless corpse in the sands of the Duat's darkest hour. The Mesektet boat sailed on. The sun rose. The world was safe. And the next night, as the sun god once again entered the Duat, As the boat drifted into that same dark cavern, Apep would be there, whole, undamaged, his red eyes glowing in the dark, his coils tensed, waiting. Apep is cursed with a terrible, an awful kind of immortality. He cannot be killed. Isfet, the principle of chaos, cannot be permanently destroyed. You can defeat it. You can repel it. You can cut it to pieces. You can win the battle with all your strength and all your magic, but you can never, ever eradicate it. It is a fundamental, indelible, and permanent part of the universe, just as the darkness is. This is the true tragedy of Apep. It's an endless, horrifying, and utterly inescapable loop of failure and regeneration. Let's for a moment try to think about this from his perspective, if you can even call it that. Is it a conscious existence? The texts are ambiguous. Is Apep a person? Does he think? Or is he just a force like gravity or entropy? Is his nightly attack an act of blind reptilian instinct, like a shark striking at a seal? Is he just a cosmic function, a piece of the universe's machinery? Or is it something more? What if he is conscious? What if he does remember? What if Apep, as he rises from the dark river, knows he is going to fail? What if he remembers in searing, agonizing detail the feeling of Set's meteoritic spear shattering his spine? What if he remembers the great cat's knife at his throat? What if he remembers the shame of his defeat, the pain of his dismemberment? If he does remember, then his nightly attack is transformed. It is no longer a simple act of predation. It becomes an act of conscious, spiteful, and completely futile rage. It is a scream of defiance at a cosmos that has preordained his failure. Does he attack Ra, night after night, knowing he will be speared and sliced and left for dead, simply because that is all he can do? Is it a compulsion, a destiny he cannot escape? The Greeks in their own mythology had a similar figure, and the comparison is impossible to ignore. Sisyphus, the cunning king who cheated death twice and was condemned by the gods to an eternity of meaningless labor. He was forced to roll a massive boulder up a steep hill in the underworld, and just as he neared the top, his strength would fail and the boulder would roll all the way back down. His punishment was his labor. His curse was its futility. He was forced to repeat his failure forever. Apep is Sisyphus, but from the other side, he is the boulder. He is the gravity. He is the steepness of the hill. He is the force that ensures the labor is eternal. His entire existence is defined not by his actions, but by his own inevitable recurring failure. He is the ultimate cosmic symbol of destructive futility. To exist for Apep is to fail. And yet, the Egyptian thinkers, the priests and scribes who spent millennia contemplating their gods in the temples of Heliopolis and Thebes saw another layer to this, a layer of profound and deeply challenging wisdom. They asked a question that echoes in our own philosophies, in our own debates on the nature of good and evil. Is chaos necessary? From a purely mythological perspective, Apep's tragedy is that he is essential. His existence, as horrifying as it is required for the universe to function. Think about it. Without Apep, Ma'at has no meaning. Order is only valuable, only precious, because chaos exists as an alternative. Truth is only a virtue because lies exist. Justice is only a struggle because injustice is a constant threat. Without Apep, Ray's journey is not heroic. It's not a battle. If the Duat was a peaceful, pleasant river, a simple, uneventful drift through 12 quiet caverns, then Ra's nightly journey wouldn't be a struggle for survival. It would be a commute. The sun's return in the morning wouldn't be a victory. It would just be a thing that happens. It would be as mundane as our own astronomical certainty. The universe would become stagnant. Without the challenge of Isfet, the triumph of Mayrat would be hollow. It is Apep's existence that forces the gods to be strong. It forces Ra to be vigilant. It forces Set to be the protector. It forces Isis and Thoth to hone their magic. Apep, in his monstrous evil way, is the engine of renewal. He is the cosmic grit in the oyster that forces the universe to create a pearl. He is the evil that is indispensable. He is the darkness that proves the light is still fighting. He validates the struggle. This complex, sophisticated, and somewhat bleak philosophy had a profound and direct effect on the average Egyptian. It was not some abstract priestly concept. It was a daily reality. It taught them two contradictory but absolutely vital lessons for living a good life. First, chaos must be fought. It must be fought daily. It must be fought relentlessly. It must be fought with all your heart, all your will, and all your might. You must never, ever give in to it. Second, chaos will always be there. You will never, ever win. This is a stunning piece of psychological insight. It was a call to eternal vigilance, but also a radical call to acceptance. It told the Egyptian farmer, you must fight evil in your own life. You must fight the Isfet of the lie you are tempted to tell. You must fight the Isfet of the theft you are tempted to commit. You must fight the Isfet of the act of cruelty or laziness or selfishness. You must uphold Mayat in your own heart, on your own farm, in your own village. But it also told him, you must accept that evil will always exist in the world. You must accept that there will be wars, there will be famines, there will be plagues, there will be traitors, there will be injustice. You will never win the war against Isfet. You can only win the battle, today's battle, the one that is right in front of you. And for the Egyptians, that battle wasn't just for the gods to fight in some distant mythological realm. They had to participate. This is where the fear of Apep, this massive cosmic struggle, spilled out of the tombs and the temples and into the daily lives of the people. They believed they had a role to play. They believed that their actions, their rituals, their will could directly influence the fight in the Duat. They performed execration rituals. These were, in effect, acts of state-sponsored black magic, aimed squarely at the enemy of Ra. The Book of Overthrowing Apep, a collection of these rituals, was a classified, powerful document kept in the temple libraries. On particularly dark days, or during certain festivals, or perhaps even on a daily basis in some temples, the priests and sometimes the pharaoh himself, as the chief upholder of Mayat, would gather in a sacred, purified space. They would create an effigy of Apep. Sometimes it was a wax model of a serpent. Sometimes a crude drawing on a piece of new papyrus, often in green or black ink. Sometimes it was just his name, Apep, written out in hieroglyphs because to the Egyptians the name was the thing. And then with all the focused, ritualistic intensity they could muster, they would destroy it. They would spit on it. They would trample it under their left foot, the left side being the side of chaos and weakness. They would stab it over and over with a special flint knife, a primitive material thought to have special power. They would bind it with rope. They would flog it. And finally, they would throw it into a special contained fire and burn it to ashes. And as they did, they would chant. They would shout the spells, the curses from the Book of Overthrowing Apep. They were not asking for help. They were commanding reality. Apep, enemy of Ra, be repulsed, retreat. Your head is severed by the great cat. Your coils are bound by Isis. Your bones are broken by Set. You are burned. You are spat upon. You will not rise. You will not rise. They believed these rituals were not symbolic. They were an act of sympathetic magic, or hika. They believed they were focusing all their spiritual energy, all their devotion to Ma'at and transmitting it directly to the gods in the Duat. They were, in that very moment, magically loading Set's spear. They were sharpening Ra's knife. They were strengthening the bonds of Isis. They were, in a very real and tangible way, helping to ensure the sun would rise. Their actions, their will, mattered on a cosmic scale. Now, just imagine for a second the terror of a solar eclipse. To us, it's a beautiful, rare, almost spiritual, astronomical event. We get our special glasses. We travel thousands of miles to stand in the path of totality. We marvel at the diamond ring effect. We feel a sense of awe. To an ancient Egyptian, it was the apocalypse. It was the end of the world happening right now. Think about it. All of their fears were based on a nightly battle. But what does an eclipse mean? It means the battle has gone wrong. It means that Apep somehow has broken free from his cycle. He has escaped the Duat. He has risen into the daytime sky in Ra's own kingdom, and he is, at that very moment, swallowing the sun. It meant Apep had won. You can imagine the scene in the streets of Thebes or Memphis. The calculations of the priests had failed. The sun, high in the sky, begins to have a bite taken out of it. The sky doesn't go dark, not at first, but a strange, sick, gray, metallic light falls over the world. The birds stop singing and fly to their nests. The temperature drops, a cold wind blows, and from every temple, from every home, from every workshop, a sound of panic. People flooding into the streets, falling to their knees, wailing. Priests frantically rushing to the temple courtyards, lighting the fires for the execration rituals. People banging on pots, on drums, on anything that would make a noise, shouting, screaming, chanting the curses with a desperate, terrified, frenzied energy. They were not watching an event. They were fighting it. They were fighting for their lives, fighting for the entire world, trying to magically, sonically, and spiritually force the serpent to spit the sun back out. And then after a few minutes of total darkness, a few minutes of Isfet triumphant, when the shadow passed and the first sliver of blinding hot light returned, the unbelievable shuddering collective sigh of relief, the weeping, the joy, the immediate prayers of gratitude. They had done it. They had won. The world was saved. Apep had been defeated once again, but he would be back. He would always be back. The image of Apep is one of the most powerful and enduring in all of mythology. It's not just a big snake. It's a carefully constructed, psychologically potent symbol designed to encapsulate every primal fear the Egyptians had. When they performed their execration rituals, when they huddled in their homes during an eclipse, this is what they saw in their mind's eye. But why? Why a serpent? Of all the forms chaos could take, a raging lion, a monstrous crocodile, a formless shadow. Why did the snake become the ultimate embodiment of Isfet? The answer, like everything in Egypt, is layered. It starts with biology. We, as primates, have a deep evolutionary and almost programmed fear of snakes. They are the other. They are limbless, moving with a silent alien grace that feels unnatural. They are cold-blooded, lacking the warmth of mammals. They strike from concealment, from the shadows, from the sand with lethal speed. They are the hidden danger, the silent assassin. For an ancient Egyptian, this was not an abstract fear. It was a daily practical one. The land of Kemet was filled with very real, very deadly serpents. The horned viper, which hides itself in the deshret. The red desert sand waiting for a misplaced foot. The Egyptian cobra, whose bite is a neurotoxic death sentence. The snake was the physical, tangible threat that crossed over from the red land of Isfet into the black land of Ma'at. Apep, in this sense, is the ultimate viper in the sand. He is the platonic ideal of the predator from below. Because that is the other key. Snakes are chthonic. They come from the earth. They live in holes, under rocks, in the below. This makes them the perfect physical representation of a creature from the duat, the underworld. Apep is not a sky monster. He is a deep monster. He is a being of the primordial mud, the new, and his slithering subterranean nature is a constant reminder of his origin. And so, when the scribes and artists of the New Kingdom began to codify their vision of the underworld, they took this base, primal fear, and magnified it to a cosmic, impossible scale. In the Amduat and the Book of Gates, his physical details are specific and terrifying. They give measurements. He is sometimes described as 16 cubits long, which is already a monstrous 27 feet. But in other texts, as his myth grew, so did his size. He is described as being 450 cubits long. Let's pause and try to visualize that. A cubit is the length of a man's forearm from elbow to fingertip. 450 cubits is over 200 meters, or nearly 700 feet. That is the length of more than 2 modern football fields. That is a 70-story skyscraper laid on its side. He is not a monster in the river. His body is the river. His very physiology was a weapon. The texts speak of his coils and folds. He didn't just attack in a straight line. He would twist his enormous body into a mass of tangled knots and loops, creating a physical barrier in the underworld river. These were the sandbanks of Apep that Ra's boat would run aground on. The gods wouldn't just have to fight him. They would have to untangle him like sailors, trying to navigate a ship through a treacherous, living reef of flesh and scale. His colors were the colors of anti-life. His scales were not the healthy green of the Nile's reeds, but the sickly green of decay. Or they were the deep, flat, light-absorbing black of the void, of the new before creation, or the pale, jaundiced yellow of sickness and plague. And then there were his eyes, in the total absolute blackness of the duat's deepest caverns. His eyes, they said, glowed with a malevolent, terrifying, hypnotic red. They were the only light in the darkness, a light that did not illuminate, but paralyzed. His roar, as we've learned, was a wave of magical stupor. His gaze was the evil eye, a weapon of pure Isfet that could freeze a lesser god in place. But the most fascinating part of Apep's imagery is not how he was depicted, but how he was destroyed. When we look at the art in the tombs on the walls, and especially in the funerary papyri, we are not looking at a portrait of the monster. We are looking at an attack. The art itself is a weapon. In ancient Egypt, to depict something was to make it real. To write a name was to give it power. And to destroy a name or an image was to magically destroy the thing itself. This is why the names of heretic pharaohs like Akhenaten were chiseled off their own monuments. It was an attempt to unmake them, to erase them from Ma'at and from existence. So when an artist, a scribe priest, sat down to illustrate a book of the dead for a wealthy nobleman, he was not just illuminating a text. He was creating a magical tool, a piece of supernatural weaponry that the deceased would carry with them into the afterlife. And that is why the depictions of Apep are so uniformly and ritualistically violent. We almost never see him whole and triumphant. We see him in the act of being defeated. We see him bound in supernatural chains, his coils held fast by the Heka, the magic of Isis. We see him held down by magical nets cast by the gods. We see his long serpentine body pierced by multiple spears, thrown by Set and the other guardians. And most often, most symbolically, we see him being cut. Recall the image of the great cat of Heliopolis we discussed earlier, the one from chapter 17 of the Book of the Dead. That depiction is not merely an illustration. It is a weapon frozen in time. By painting that specific act, the blade slicing into the neck, the artist was not just telling a story. He was actively participating in the eternal victory, ensuring that for the cosmos, the cat would always be cutting and the snake would always be dying. This art is not a story. It's a spell. It is a declaration frozen in time that Maat will always defeat Isfet. It is a snapshot of the eternal recurring moment of victory. By painting this scene on the tomb wall, by drawing it on the papyrus that would be wrapped with the mummy, the Egyptian was actively participating in that victory. He was ensuring that for himself and for the entire cosmos, the cat would always be cutting and the snake would always be dying. This imagery, this focus on cutting and dismemberment, becomes even more profound when you realize what else the serpent represented. In Egyptian culture, the snake was not always evil, far from it. This is another example of their sophisticated, dualistic thinking. The snake could also be a powerful symbol of protection in life. The goddess Wadjet was the protective cobra goddess of Lower Egypt. She was the uraeus, the rearing cobra that you see on the brow of every single pharaoh's crown. This snake was a protector. She was a symbol of Maat, of divine royal authority, who would, according to myth, spit fire at the enemies of the king. She was the good snake. Even more, the Ouroboros, the image of a snake swallowing its own tail, appears in Egyptian funerary texts. It was a powerful symbol of eternity. It represented the cycle of life and death, the unending, self-sustaining, and orderly passage of time. It was the universe as a perfect, closed, self-renewing system. It was, in its own way, another symbol of Maat. So Apep is the other serpent. He is the perversion of these life-giving symbols. He is not Wadjet, the protector on the king's brow. He is the devourer from the darkness, the enemy of the king's god, Ra, and he is not the Ouroboros, the symbol of cyclic eternity. Apep's goal is to break the cycle. His goal is to stop the sun from rising, to end the eternal repetition. He does not want the Ouroboros. He wants to uncoil the universe. He wants to return it to the linear, static, unchanging eternity of the dark, formless new before creation. He is the anti-Ouroboros. He is the snake of anti-life. This is where the image of Apep moves from a simple monster to a deep psychological archetype. Scholars in the 20th century, from Sigmund Freud to Carl Jung, would have had a field day with this. They spoke of the serpent as a powerful universal symbol. It represents the unconscious mind. It is the reptilian brain that sits at the base of our own skull, the part of us that controls our most primal base instincts: fear, rage, hunger, survival. Apep is the monster from the id. He is the embodiment of the fear of losing control. He is the symbol of our own destructive base instincts that our civilized mind, our own personal Maat, must constantly fight to keep suppressed. He is the Isfet within us. The Egyptians' nightly cosmic battle was a mirror, writ large, of the daily internal battle that every human being must fight to uphold order, reason, and goodness against the chaotic reptilian impulses of their own nature. The fear of Apep is, at its deepest level, the fear of ourselves. And this powerful, terrifying image, of course, did not stay confined to the Nile Valley. The chaos serpent is one of the oldest and most widespread motifs in all of human storytelling. It's as if, as soon as human beings gathered around a fire, they looked into the darkness beyond and saw the same coiling shape. The Mesopotamians, Egypt's great rivals, had Tiamat. She was the primordial goddess of the chaotic salt water, a massive dragon-like sea serpent. In their creation epic, the Enuma Elish, the hero god Marduk must fight and kill her. He splits her body in two like a shellfish, and from one half he creates the heavens, and from the other he creates the earth. The Norse in their cold northern lands whispered of Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, a child of the trickster god Loki, a god of chaos himself. Jormungandr was cast into the sea by Odin, where he grew so impossibly large that he encircled the entire world, Midgard, grasping his own tail in his mouth. He is a menacing Ouroboros, lying at the bottom of the ocean, waiting. He is not a daily threat, but an eschatological one. He will only rise at Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, for a final mutual destruction battle with his eternal enemy, the god Thor. And of course, there is the Leviathan from the Hebrew Bible, the monstrous sea creature, the symbol of God's awesome and total power over the untamable chaos of the deep. In the book of Job, God challenges Job, "Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook?" The answer is no. Only God can. Leviathan is the symbol of a chaos that is already mastered by the one true, omnipotent creator. But this is what makes Apep unique. Tiamat is a chaos dragon who is killed once at the beginning of time in order to create the world. Jormungandr is a chaos serpent who is waiting for a final one-time battle at the end of time. Leviathan is a chaos monster who is already subdued, a symbol of a power that is static and absolute. Apep is none of these. He is not a one-time creation boss. He is not waiting for a final apocalypse. And he is never truly subdued. Apep is a job. He is a recurring, chronic, existential problem. He is a monster that must be managed every single night, forever. The myth of Apep is not a myth of creation or a myth of the apocalypse. It is a myth of maintenance. He is the archetype that teaches us that the fight against chaos is never, ever over. It's a job that is never, ever done. This brings us then to the central motif of Apep's entire story. It is the logical, inescapable, and chilling conclusion of everything we've learned so far. It is the one single unifying idea that makes this 4,000-year-old myth feel as though it were written yesterday. It is a theme that has echoed through thousands of years of our own storytelling, a line whispered in every great epic, every fantasy saga, every horror film. It is the great dark truth of the human condition. Evil never dies. It only waits for night to fall. Apep is the immortality of evil. He is the living, coiling, supernatural proof that you can fight corruption. You can win a war. You can jail the criminal. You can heal the disease. You can, with all your magical and physical might, literally dismember the demon. But the potential for chaos, the Isfet itself, will always return. It does not die. It just waits. This idea of waiting is perhaps the most terrifying part of all. A direct, constant attack is one thing. It is a battle, a clear and present danger that you can meet with force. But an evil that waits is something else entirely. It implies a cold reptilian patience. It implies an inevitability. It is the enemy that bides its time, knowing that sooner or later the sun will set, the guard will be lowered, the hero will grow old, the night, in whatever form it takes, will fall. And when it does, the evil that was not dead, but merely dormant, will rise again. This belief shaped the Egyptian psyche into one of eternal grinding vigilance. Our modern Western storytelling, which is largely built on a linear Judeo-Christian model, has trained us to expect a final victory. There is a final battle, a final judgment, a war to end all wars. We are obsessed with endings. We want to see the Dark Lord defeated forever. We want the hero to sail off into the sunset. We want the happily ever after. The ancient Egyptian worldview was not linear. It was cyclical. The sun rose, the sun set. The Nile flooded, the Nile receded. The king died, a new king was crowned. The universe was a great cosmic machine that repeated. And in this cyclical world, there was no final victory. There was no hap illy ever after. There was only, and they lived. There was only the survival of today. There was only the victory of this morning's sunrise. The entire purpose of life was not to win the war against Isfet, but to simply fight it every single day to ensure that the cycle could continue. The ultimate victory was not ending the fight. The ultimate victory was ensuring the fight could be fought again tomorrow. Once you see this motif, this Apep archetype, this idea of the recurring, unkillable, waiting evil, you see it everywhere. It is the engine of our most powerful and enduring myths. The Egyptians themselves gave us another perfect example in the complex form of Set. As we know, Set is the hero of the duat, the one who stands on the prow and spears Apep. He is loyal, chaos. But in the other great myth of Egypt, the Osirian cycle, he is the villain. He is the jealous brother who murders the good king Osiris, hacks his body to pieces, and usurps the throne. Set embodies the duality of chaos. He is the evil you need to fight the greater evil. But even after he is defeated by his nephew Horus, even after he is tamed and put back in service of Ra, the potential for his chaotic evil remains. He is never destroyed. He is merely reintegrated. The Egyptians understood that the chaos within their own system, the desert, the foreigner, the storm, was a permanent, manageable problem, just as the external chaos of Apep was. But the archetype bleeds out across all cultures. Look at the Norse. They had Loki. Like Set, Loki is a creature of internal chaos. He is a trickster, a giant who lives among the gods of Asgard. He is Odin's blood brother. He is inside the system. But all the while he is waiting. He is biding his time. He fathers the very monsters, the wolf Fenrir, the serpent Jormungandr, who are fated to end the world at Ragnarok. When he is finally caught and punished for his ultimate crime, orchestrating the death of the god Balder, he is not killed. He is bound, chained to a rock beneath the earth, with a serpent dripping venom onto his face. And there he waits, in agony, until the night of Ragnarok falls, when he will break free, lead the forces of Isfet, and burn the world. He is the evil that is temporarily repelled, waiting for his chance to return. But perhaps the most perfect, most complete modern retelling of the Apep motif comes from J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth. The original Dark Lord, Melkor or Morgoth, is the original Isfet. He is the great Valar who introduces discord into the music of creation. He is the primordial chaos. After a long, terrible war, the gods finally defeat him. But they cannot kill him. They can only expel him, casting him out into the timeless void beyond the walls of the world. They cut the head off the snake, but the evil he sowed, the malice he poured into the very matter of the world remains. And, crucially, his chief lieutenant, his most powerful servant, Sauron, escapes. Sauron is the heir to the chaos. He is Apep, regenerating. He hides. He waits. He bides his time for centuries in Dol Guldur, in Mordor, slowly rebuilding his strength. And when he rises, the world must fight the same war all over again. In the Second Age, Sauron is defeated again. The great kingdom of Numenor is destroyed, and Sauron's body is annihilated in the flood. But he is not killed. His spirit, his will endures. He takes another shape, a darker, more terrible one. He is defeated again at the end of the Second Age by the last alliance of elves and men. Isildur cuts the One Ring from his hand. His body is once again destroyed, his spirit dissipated. The world is saved, but the evil is not destroyed, because his essence, his Isfet, is bound to the ring. The ring is not destroyed, it is lost. And so the spirit of Sauron waits. He is a shadow, a necromancer, a nameless fear in the dark, an evil eye in the land of Mordor, the exact same symbol as the evil eye of Apep. He waits for thousands of years for his vessel, his Horcrux, to be found. Always after a defeat and a respite, Tolkien wrote, the shadow takes another shape and grows again. That is Apep. That is the cyclical, recurring, unkillable nature of Isfet. The Lord of the Rings is not a story about a war. It's a story about the return of a war that was never truly finished. This theme is so powerful it becomes the blueprint for almost all modern fantasy. Think of Voldemort in the Harry Potter series. He is a villain defined by his serpentine features, his parcel tongue, his identity as the heir of Slytherin, and his entire obsession, the conquest of death. He is terrified of the linear end, and so he makes himself into a cyclical, Apep-like figure. He splits his soul into Horcruxes. He makes it so that his body can be destroyed, but his essence cannot. When he is killed by Lily Potter's love, he doesn't die. He becomes a shadow, a thing, less than the meanest ghost that must wait. He waits for 10 years, a formless, bodiless evil. He possesses small animals. He hides pathetically on the back of another man's head, a parasite. He is biding his time, waiting for the night to fall, waiting for the right ingredients, the right ritual that will allow him to regenerate. Every single book in that series is a nightly battle. Voldemort in some form attacks. He is defeated. The heroes survive. The sun rises on a new school year. But they all know he is still out there. They know he will return. The fight is not over. It is a chronic problem. And this archetype, this Apep archetype, reaches its most primal, most visceral form in the modern horror film. Think of the great slasher villains, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees. Why do they always come back? It's not just a lazy trope to sell tickets for a sequel. It's because the filmmakers, perhaps without even knowing it, have tapped into the Apep myth. Michael Myers in the original Halloween is not a man. He is called the Shape. He is purely and simply evil. He has no motive. He has no reason. He is Isfet personified. He is the senseless, unthinking chaos that comes to the orderly, mat-filled world of Haddonfield. And at the end of the film, Dr. Loomis, his Set, his guardian, shoots him 6 times in the chest. He falls from a second-story balcony. He is, by all laws of man, dead. And when Loomis looks down, he is gone. He didn't die. He just got up and waited. He is waiting for the next Halloween, the next night. Think of Freddy Krueger, the evil that waits for you in the most vulnerable night of all, your dreams, the one place you must go. He is the recurring, unkillable psychological Apep, or, to take it to its most philosophical extreme, think of the cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft. His entire mythology is the Apep myth, taken to its bleakest conclusion. His gods, Cthulhu, Azathoth, are not gods at all. They are vast, chaotic alien forces from a time before human creation. They are the new, the primordial Isfet. And what is the famous line about Cthulhu? That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. Cthulhu is not dead in his sunken city of R'lyeh. He is waiting. He is dead dreaming. He is waiting for the stars to be right, a cosmic night to fall, when he will rise again and plunge the world back into a glorious, formless chaos. In Lovecraft's world, our Mayat, our science, our civilization, our sanity, is a tiny, fragile, and temporary island of light in a vast, black, cosmic ocean of Isfet. And that ocean is always rising. This motif, this archetype, is everywhere. It is the engine of all great drama. A story where evil is permanently and easily defeated feels false. It feels childish. We are drawn to stories of the eternal struggle, of the recurring shadow, because we instinctively recognize the Apep motif as a fundamental truth of the human experience. We know evil is not a one-and-done problem. This is the great and terrible application of the myth. It's not just for stories. It's how we must process our own world. In our society, we love to declare war on abstract concepts. The war on drugs, the war on terror, the war on poverty, the war on crime. But these are not wars that can be won. They are not linear conflicts with a victory parade at the end. They are Apep. They are chronic, recurring existential problems that must be managed. You can never, ever eradicate drugs or poverty or the potential for terrorism. You can only fight them. You can only create systems, a divine crew, to manage the problem, to fight the battle today. Corruption, injustice, hatred, bigotry, tribalism. These are not problems we can solve. They are Isfet. They are permanent, latent parts of the human condition. You can defeat a manifestation of it, a specific dictator, a specific unjust law, a specific corrupt official. You can cut the head off the snake, but the potential for it, the Isfet in the human heart, remains. It just waits. It waits for a new opening. It waits for the night of an economic crisis or a political vacuum or a time of great social fear. And then it regenerates. It takes a new shape and grows again. This is the great, enduring, and difficult lesson of Apep. He is the archetype that teaches us that vigilance is eternal. You can never rest. The moment you believe evil is truly gone forever, the moment you believe the war is won, the moment you stop standing guard at the prow, that is the moment the waters begin to churn. That is the moment the shadow begins to swallow the river. Apep is the challenge that makes us stronger. He is the enemy that gives the hero a purpose. He is the darkness that makes the dawn so incredibly, desperately precious. The civilization of ancient Egypt faded. It is the inevitable fate of all human things, the ultimate victory of Isfet in the form of time. The grand cyclical machine of the pharaohs, which had run for 3,000 years, eventually ground to a halt. The land of Kemet was conquered. The Persians came, then the Greeks, under Alexander. His general Ptolemy seized the throne, and for 300 years Greek-speaking pharaohs, like the famous Cleopatra, ruled from Alexandria. Their gods began to merge. The hawk-headed Ra was fused with the Greek sun god Helios. The great protector Isis became a universal mother goddess, her cult spreading as far as Roman London. The gods began to change, to dilute. Then came the Romans. Egypt became a province, the personal breadbasket of an emperor. And with the Romans came a new, uncompromising faith from the East, Christianity. This new religion had no tolerance for the old ways. It had its own story of good and evil, of a final, linear battle. The temples were closed by force or by decree. The temple of Isis at Philae, the last bastion of the old faith, was finally shut down by the Emperor Justinian in the 6th century A.D. The gods were forgotten, or worse, they were demonized. The new priests looked at the images of Anubis, the jackal god of the dead, or Set, the strange chaotic beast god, and they saw devils. The hieroglyphs, once the sacred words of God, became meaningless, baffling scribbles on ruined walls. The Book of the Dead was no longer copied. The nightly battle in the Duat ceased because no one was left to remember it. No one was left to perform the execration rituals, to light the fires, or to chant the spells. Apep, it would seem, had finally won. He hadn't swallowed the sun, but he had outlasted his enemies. The great cat was gone. Set's spear lay rusting in the sand. The Mesektet boat was permanently dry-docked. The silence of the Nu, the primordial abyss, had returned to the temples. But the fear that Apep represented, that never went away. It is too primal. It is too deep in our DNA. The fear of the dark, the fear of chaos, the fear of the world ending. That fear is immortal. It just changed its name. It was poured into new, more modern vessels. It became the apocalypse of St. John, the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil or Satan, bound for 1,000 years, only to be loosed for one final cataclysmic battle. The concept of Isfet became sin. The nightly cyclical battle for Ma'at became a single linear lifetime struggle for the salvation of the soul. The serpent endured. The fear endured. And then, in the 19th century, we opened the tombs. We deciphered the hieroglyphs. We unrolled the papyri, and the gods of Egypt awoke from their long sleep. We met them again, not as gods, but as mythology. We saw Ra, Isis, Osiris, and we saw him. We saw the great serpent pierced by 1,000 knives, his name hacked and spat upon. We relearned the name of the ancient enemy. For 100 years he remained a curiosity, a mythological monster, a story from a dead civilization, until the 21st century, until our own civilization, in its arrogance, in its scientific ma'at, reached so high into the heavens that we found him again, waiting. The new temple was not at Karnak or Heliopolis. It was at Kitt Peak National Observatory, a cluster of white, gleaming domes sitting high in the desert of Arizona. The new priests were not men in white linen robes, but astronomers in fleece jackets, peering not into the Duat, but into the deep black Nu of outer space. It was June of 2004. A team of astronomers, Roy Tucker, David Tholin, and Fabrizio Bernardi, were conducting a routine search for near-Earth objects, or NEOs. This is our modern scientific execration ritual. It is our vigilance. We scan the skies just as the Egyptians scanned the horizon, looking for the Isfet that might come from the Deshret of the cosmos. On the night of June 19th, they found one, a faint, fast-moving point of light. It was given a routine, bureaucratic, scientific name, 2004 MN4. Just another rock, just another file in the database. But as the priests of Ma'at had to know the true name of the demons, our new priest had to know the true orbit of the asteroids. And as they gathered more data, as they looked back at older pre-discovery images, a terrible picture began to emerge. The calculations run through the supercomputers that serve as our modern books of Thoth began to refine the serpent's path. This was not just any rock. This one was big, about 370 meters wide, larger than the Eiffel Tower, and it was coming close. On December 18, 2004, the calculations reached a chilling new level of precision. The astronomers at NASA's Sentry program, our modern guardians of the boat, announced that 2004 MN4 had a probability of striking the Earth. They placed it at a 1 on the Torino scale, a 10-point scale that measures the hazard of an asteroid impact. A 1 is not a panic button. It just means this is unusual. We need to pay attention. But as more data came in, the night began to fall. Just a few days later, the probability rose. The object was upgraded to a 2 on the Torino scale. Eyebrows were raised. This was a serious threat. And then on December the 23rd, just before Christmas, the calculations were run again. The probability of impact jumped to 1 in 233. The Torino scale rating was raised to a 4. No one understood the significance of this at the time, but this was unprecedented. It was and remains to this day the highest rating ever given to any object in the history of asteroid tracking. A 4 means a close encounter, meriting attention by astronomers. Calculations give a 1% or greater chance of collision capable of regional devastation. A few days later, the odds got worse. The probability of a direct impact on a very specific date, Friday, April 13th, 2029, rose to 1 in 37, a 2.7% chance. In the cold, sterile world of orbital mechanics, a 2.7% chance of a global catastrophe is not a chance. It is a 5-alarm fire. It is the apocalypse happening right now. A 370-meter-wide rock striking the Earth at 30,000 miles per hour would not be a regional event. It would release the energy of over 1,200 megatons of TNT. The most powerful nuclear bomb ever detonated, the Tsar Bomba, was 50 megatons. This would be 24 of them, all in one spot. It would be an extinction-level event. It would not just destroy a country, it would end our climate. It would blot out the sun with dust, plunging the world into a global winter, starving the human race into oblivion. It was a cosmic object that threatened to literally swallow the light and plunge the world into eternal darkness. And so the discoverers, David Tholin and Roy Tucker, faced with a celestial object that threatened the entire mayad of human civilization, reached back. They reached back across 4,000 years of human history to the only civilization that truly understood this specific fear, and they gave the object its true name. They named it 99,942 Apophis. It was the ultimate act of modern sympathetic magic. Our modern priests, our scientists, stared into the blackness of space, and they saw the same enemy the ancient Egyptians saw in the Duat. The name was a warning. It was a definition. It was a call to arms. The great serpent was no longer a myth. He was a 700 million ton rock of iron and stone, and he was coming. What happened next was the modern equivalent of the book of overthrowing Apep. It was our version of the entire nation, from the pharaoh down, banging on pots and chanting the spells. Every eye on Earth, every major observatory, every radar dish swiveled to look at Apophis. This was not a passive observation. This was a fight. The great Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, our set spear, fired a powerful radar beam at the asteroid, painting its surface to get a precise measurement to know its enemy. They were all, in that moment, focusing their Heka, their magic of science, mathematics, and reason, on the serpent. And then on December 27, 2004, the sunrise came. The new radar data, combined with all the other observations, was fed into the computers. A new hyper-precise orbit was calculated, and the probability of impact in 2029 dropped. It dropped from 1 in 3017 to 0, a collective global sigh of relief shuddering its way through the world's scientific agencies. The world, just like in ancient Thebes, was saved. Apophis would pass us by. It would be a close shave. It will still pass closer than our own geostationary weather satellites, a terrifying naked-eye object streaking across the night sky in 2029. But it would miss. But the story wasn't over, because this is Apep, and evil waits. The relief was short-lived, because the problem wasn't 2029. The problem was that the 2029 pass would be so close, the asteroid would fly through a tiny 800-meter-wide region of space called a gravitational keyhole. If it passed through that specific keyhole, Earth's own gravity would tweak its orbit like a cosmic slingshot, putting it on a new, perfect collision course for the next night, for the year 2036. The serpent had been repelled, but he was now waiting. For years, the threat of 2036 lingered. Then, as more data came, the 2036 impact was ruled out. But a new keyhole threat emerged, Isita, for 2068. The battle never ended. It was a chronic, recurring existential problem. It was only in March of 2021, after yet more powerful radar observations, that our modern priests were finally able to declare a true victory, at least for our lifetime. NASA announced that with the new data, the 2068 impact was also ruled out. A 2068 impact is not in the realm of possibility anymore, one scientist said, and our calculations don't show any impact risk for at least the next 100 years. We had done it. We had, for now, neutralized this particular serpent. Our Mayad of science had triumphed over this Isfet from the void, but the ocean of the void remains. There are other serpents in that dark, and our vigilance, our nightly scan of the sky, must continue forever. The story of Apep endures, not as a story about a long-dead civilization's monster, but because it is, in a way, our story. We no longer believe a giant serpent tries to swallow a divine sunboat, but we live in a world that constantly feels just as fragile, just as besieged. We are surrounded by our own forms of Isfet. We see it in the political chaos that threatens to tear our nations apart. We see it in the social injustice that feels like a wound that will not heal. We see it in the looming existential threat of climate change, a slow-motion swallowing of our world's light, a human-made Isfet born of our own actions. We see it in the sudden biological chaos of a global pandemic. We see it in the Isfet of war, of famine, of the lie that travels faster than the truth. And we see it every single day in our own hearts, the personal inner demons, the reptilian brain, the Isfet of our own fear, our own rage, our own despair, our own selfishness, the chaotic impulses that our personal Ma'at, our conscience, our better angels must fight to keep suppressed every single day. We are all in our own lives fighting a battle to uphold Ma'at. We are all trying to maintain order, balance, truth, and goodness against the forces that seek to unravel it. The ancient Egyptians' great, profound, and brave insight was not that they could win this war. That is our naive, modern, linear dream, the dream of the final victory and the happily ever after. Their insight was much more difficult and much more true. Their insight was that the fight itself was the victory, the act of standing on the prow, spear in hand, the act of chanting the spell, the act of knowing the enemy is immortal, knowing he will be back tomorrow night but refusing to surrender, the act of fighting him anyway with all your might to protect the light for one more day. That is what it means to be human. That is what it means to be truly, meaningfully alive. Apep, the great serpent, the swallower, is the eternal, terrifying symbol of indestructible evil. But Ra, in his boat, surrounded by his defenders, surrounded by the contradictions of Set, the wisdom of Thoth, the magic of Isis, and most importantly, the souls of ordinary righteous people, that is the symbol of indestructible hope. The Egyptians looked at the universe and saw a terrifying eternal conflict, but they did not despair. They did not surrender to the darkness. They chose to light the fire. They chose to chant the spell. They chose to pick up the spear. They chose to participate in the sunrise. And in so doing, they left us a single powerful message, one that echoes from the painted walls of their tombs, across 4,000 years of human struggle right into this very room. Evil may be eternal, but so is our will to fight it.